Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today we're tearing into a story that is just one of the most improbable and consequential in human history. How two brothers from a humble bicycle shop solved the problem of flight. And think about the question that historians always come back to. Why them? I mean, before Orville and Wilbur Wright, controlled, powered flight it was basically seen as impossible.
Pure magic, something out of mythology.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't for a lack of trying. The problem had shattered reputations. It had even claimed lives.
And that's the staggering contrast, isn't it? You have these global giants engineers, scientists with government grants, all the credentials in the world.
Right, building these massive complex machines. And then you have the Wrights. No university degrees, no government funding, not even a formal engineering background, just two mechanics from Dayton, Ohio.
So our mission in this deep dive is to get into the how. It's not just about the plane they built, the Wright Flyer, it's about how they thought. How did they succeed when literally everyone else failed? We're diving into the mindset that let them see the sky in a completely new way.
We're really looking for that intellectual pivot, the thing that unlocked it all. And it starts with their origins, because it's so easy to just write them off as bicycle mechanics. But their background built a very specific kind of genius.
Okay, let's unpack that. Wilbur was born in 1867, Orville, just 4 years later. And their lives were modest. Their father was a traveling bishop.
Right, so they moved around. But the sources all point to their mother, Susan. They describe her as mechanically brilliant.
And that inclination was everything. They weren't, classically academic. They just grew up fixing things, building things. They ran their own printing business when they were just teenagers.
Constantly tinkering, they built their own tools, their own machines. This wasn't specialized engineering training. It was a practical education in, applied physics, in problem solving.
And all that curiosity got focused, really laser focused, by one simple object. Their father comes home one day with this little toy helicopter.
Yeah, famously made of cork and paper and bamboo, and it was powered by a rubber band.
Just a little toy.
The sources call it the seed of modern aviation, because their dad tosses it in the air and it doesn't just fall, it flies. And it stayed there for a moment. For those two boys, that was proof. It showed them that powered flight wasn't a fairy tale. It was a mechanical puzzle that could be solved.
And this just sets the stage for how hard that puzzle was. I mean, if you're living in the 1890s, the failure rate for flying machines is 100%. The flying problem had defeated the entire world.
Oh, absolutely. The historical weight of failure was immense. Governments had poured fortunes into these projects. You had Samuel Langley in the U.S., backed by the Smithsonian, the War Department.
Huge projects.
Huge. And they were building these gigantic steam-powered machines that on paper should have worked.
Yeah.
But they collapsed. They crashed right on launch. Some inventors even died trying. The consensus was the laws of physics just don't allow for human flight.
So how did the Wrights, working away in their little bicycle shop, see past that wall of failure? What was their advantage?
It really boils down to humility and their method. Unlike the big government-backed guys who had to report to committees and the press, the Wrights just had one focus.
Knowledge.
Knowledge. They didn't care about fame. They didn't care about being right. They just cared about understanding the problem. And that gave them the freedom to fail, to admit they were wrong instantly, and just pivot without any public humiliation.
And that flexibility, that focus, led them right to the huge mistake that all their competitors were making. What was the world so obsessed with?
Brute force. It was all about engines and wings.
Right, the power.
Exactly, the power. The assumption was if you just build a strong enough motor and a big enough wing, you'll beat gravity. They were solving for lift.
Which it turns out was the wrong problem.
It was completely the wrong problem, because once you solve for lift, you create a much more dangerous problem.
Right.
Instability.
Yeah.
And that's the genius of what they did. They realized putting a powerful engine on an unstable machine just means you crash faster. So they asked a different question, the critical question. How do you control a machine once it's in the air?
It's such a simple, elegant pivot. They had this profound realization that, birds don't fly with power, birds fly with control.
Yes, exactly. You can have the most powerful wings ever, but if you can't steer, you can't fly.
So to understand control, they stopped reading the engineering textbooks of the day.
Which were often just wildly wrong about aerodynamics.
And they started looking at birds for hours, just watching.
And they weren't watching how fast the birds flapped. They were watching what a bird did when a gust of wind hit it. how its wings would twist, tilt, dip, and adjust to stay balanced.
And that observation, that simple observation, leads directly to their foundational invention, wing warping.
This was their solution to control, specifically controlling the aircraft's roll, keeping the wings level.
Okay, we have to slow down here because this is the cornerstone. What exactly is wing warping?
Well, think about riding a bike. To turn left, you lean left. An airplane needs to do the same thing to tilt or roll. But earlier gliders were just rigid boxes. You couldn't lean them. The Wrights figured out a way, with wires and pulleys, to literally twist the outer edges of their wings.
So twisting the wings would cause the plane to roll, to tilt, allowing them to turn. It sounds so simple, but it was revolutionary. It made the pilot part of the balancing act.
It was the birth of active dynamic control. And because they were so focused on getting real data, they knew they needed a place to test this, somewhere far away from prying eyes.
Which brings us to their famous testing grounds. To test their gliders, long before they added an engine, they needed strong, steady winds, and they chose a remote spot in North Carolina, Kitty Hawk.
Kitty Hawk was perfect. It was isolated, no crowds, no reporters, no competition. They just wanted to work in silence. This wasn't about putting on a show. It was about getting clean, consistent data.
But the real science, the thing that separates them from every other inventor of that era, happened back in Dayton. They realized the existing data they were using on aerodynamics. It was all wrong.
Yeah. The tables published by famous scientists were fundamentally flawed. They just couldn't trust the established science. So back in the bicycle shop, these two mechanics made a radical decision. They decided to build their own wind tunnel.
You just have to pause and appreciate the audacity of that. A homemade wind tunnel. Major universities with huge budgets didn't have accurate wind tunnels. The Wrights built one out of a wooden box and an old fan.
It just speaks volumes about their confidence in their own method.
Yeah.
They weren't going to accept conventional wisdom. They were going to create their own science. And they didn't just build it. They used it relentlessly. They tested over 200 different wing shapes in that thing.
200. This wasn't guesswork. It was a comprehensive scientific study. They were meticulously logging lift and drag for every single shape. They weren't just building a plane. They were discovering the fundamental laws of aerodynamics.
For the first time in history.
Yeah.
They were getting the real data that the rest of the world was missing. So by the time they got back to Kitty Hawk in 1903, they knew mathematically that their machine could fly.
Yep.
And that they could control it.
And all of that quiet work, all that data, it all culminates on one freezing morning, December 17th, 1903.
The conditions were terrible, cold wind, wet sand, but the machine, the Wright Flyer, was ready.
A coin toss decided who would fly first. Orville won, so he lies down in the lower wing. Wilbur is there, steadying the wingtip against the wind.
The engine starts, the propellers turn, the machine moves down this little track they built, and then it lifts. The first flight lasted a mere 12 seconds.
12 seconds.
They covered 120 feet. It's hard to imagine a more mundane-sounding event that so completely changed the course of human history.
It really did split history in two. They made a few more flights that day. The longest one lasted 59 seconds, less than a minute in the air.
But it was enough.
Yeah.
It proved their hypothesis was right. Control was the key, and they had found it. They had solved the problem.
Now, here's the great irony. When the Wright brothers announced this incredible achievement, what was the reaction?
Total and complete disbelief. People laughed. Newspapers refused to print the story. Scientists, probably embarrassed by their own failures, called them frauds. The world just couldn't accept that two bicycle mechanics had done what the world's great institutions had declared impossible.
The disbelief was so total that the Wrights made a truly radical choice. Instead of chasing headlines, instead of trying to convince everyone, they just went silent.
They just retreated.
Yeah.
For 5 years. They kept building, kept flying in secret fields near Dayton, just refining the machine. They focused on iteration, not validation. They knew the only proof that would matter was a perfected machine, flying flawlessly.
And that decision to prioritize private perfection over public fame is maybe the most important part of this whole story. They used those 5 years to turn a fragile invention into a robust, reliable aircraft.
And that quiet work led to the ultimate validation in 1908. When they finally did their public demonstrations in Europe and in America, the change was seismic.
Because they weren't just hopping off a sand dune anymore. They were taking off, turning, circling overhead. People in the crowds were screaming just in sheer disbelief and awe. Skepticism just vanished overnight.
But their true legacy isn't just about being first. It's about the blueprint they created. They didn't just invent a plane. They invented the fundamental principles of flight.
Let's define that blueprint for everyone listening, because this is the key takeaway. The Wrights invented the three-axis control system.
This is the critical framework.
Yeah.
Any object moving in 3D space needs control over three axes. You've got pitch, which is tilting the nose up and down.
Okay.
You've got roll, which is tilting the wings side to side. That was their wing warping.
Yeah.
And you have yaw, which is turning the nose left or right.
And they linked them all together so the pilot can manage all three at once. Before then, people were only thinking about maybe two axes.
Exactly. And every single modern aircraft today, a passenger jet, a fighter plane, even the drone delivering your package, it uses that same interconnected three-axis control system they conceptualized.
So the application of their work is it's monumental. It's shaped global transportation, warfare, trade, tourism.
Even space travel. A rocket has to fly through the atmosphere first, and it has to obey the laws of aerodynamics and control that the Wrights discovered. The entire world flies on their knowledge.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this? Their success, when you boil it all down, came from asking the right question control, not power, and then backing it up with just relentless methodical work. That homemade wind tunnel, those 200 wing shapes, that's the real story.
And the powerful lesson from their story is just so inspiring. You don't need privilege, connections, or degrees to change the world. You only need obsession, curiosity, and courage. Their humility allowed them to see a truth that the pride of established science just couldn't.
So here's where it gets really interesting, something for you to think about after this. The Wrights succeeded by going quiet, by working in secret for 5 years after their first flight. Now imagine if they had chased immediate public validation back in 1903, constantly managing fame, investors, the press, the government. Would that public pressure have derailed them?
It's a fascinating thought experiment.
Consider the incredible power of deliberate, private iteration versus the constant distraction of early, loud publicity. What does it really take to perfect something that changes the world?
In an age that's obsessed with launch announcements and getting to market first, maybe silence is the most valuable asset an inventor can have.
Something to think about the next time you look up and see a plane in the sky. Thanks for diving in with us.